All right, welcome everyone. Welcome to this session. So let's begin. I will take few minutes for introduction part, and then I will go into the topic for today, which is related to constructors and initialization blocks. Okay. So let me just begin with a very brief introduction of mine and of this training. So as you can see from this slide, I did one in December 2009, and then I also did my SCWCD certification in early 2012. I have training experience of well over 3 years with Whizlabs. A little bit about OCPJP 6 exam. The duration of exam is about 150 minutes. The number of questions that you 60, and passing score is 61%. Okay, and now for this exam we recommend this book called SCJP 6 Study Guide by Kathy Serra and Bert Bates. This is an excellent book for preparation of this exam, and we refer this to each and every aspirant of this particular exam. And this is the book we also follow in our 4 days of training, right? And you can see the 7 sections of the syllabus, right? Starting from declarations, initial, and going all the way till fundamentals and collections and generics. There, right? Now, if you want to see which section is covered on which day of our training, you can see on the slide. So you can see each and every section of the OCPJP 6 exam is indeed covered based on a logical flow of the syllabus. All right, so that was pretty much it about the introduction part. Are there any questions till now? Anyone having any questions so far? Anything related to introduction? Okay, I can see one question. Yeah, Raghunath, the name of the book was SCJP 6 Study Guide by Kathy Serra and Bert Bates. I can show you that. Just give me a minute. Okay, this is the title of the book. You can see that on the slide. Just Google it and you should be able to find it. All right. Then if there are no questions, let's begin with our topic for today, which is related to constructors and initialization blocks. Okay. So primary topic for today will be initialization blocks. Constructors, I just need to give you a quick overview because we will be using some of the concepts from them in the initialization blocks. Okay, so let's just quickly review about constructors so that we can straight away start with the initialization blocks in few minutes. Okay, so let's consider following. Let's say you have a class called animal define. Okay, and then there is a class called horse define, which is extending from animal. Okay, now in the animal class, let's say I have defined a constructor something like this, public animal. Okay, and what I'm doing here is I'm just saying system.out.println and just saying animal to be printed. Okay, now in the horse class, what I'm doing is I am creating a horse constructor. Okay, and let me introduce a main method in animal class as well. So let's say we have a main method defined something like right, and all I'm doing inside this method is horse h equal to new horse. That's it. So what do you guys think will be the output from here? Can some of you at least type the answer in the questions panel here? What do you think will be the output if this code is run, this main method? All right, great. So I can see a lot of answers coming. So guys, answer here will be actually animal followed by horse. So you will see two things in the output, animal followed by horse. Even though you can see you are just calling the horse constructor, right? But you will still see the animal in the output. The reason is following. Whenever you create an object of a class, right? Whenever you create an object of a class, the constructor of parent class is always called, right? And the reason for that is so as to initialize any instance variables that child class might be inheriting from the parent class. Right, so you can imagine there can be some instance variables defined inside the animal class which horse class might be inheriting, right? And those instance variables could have been initialized in the animal constructor. So it is very necessary that if you are creating a child class object, you do need to call the animal class or the parent class constructor to initialize those variables which you are inheriting. Okay. Now here is what actually happens. You can see that in this horse constructor, Jitendra, animal will actually get printed first. I'm going to show you how animal is actually getting printed first. Okay. Right now in this, there is nothing like a line of code which is actually making a call to parent class animals constructor, right? So if this is the case that you are not explicitly making a call to the animal class constructor, right, in your constructor here, right? What is going to happen, compiler is going to do that for you. When compiler compiles this code, it will check the first line of your constructor, right? It will see that, okay, you are not making a call to the parent class constructor as the first line. So what it will do is, it will do following. It will just insert a call to the no argument constructor of the parent class, right? So either you can write this explicitly yourself, right, or compiler will do that for you, right? So this line will be inserted by the compiler, right? And the same thing will be done in the animal class, by the way, right? Same thing will be done in the animal class, right? But to which constructor the super call will go to of the animal class? This super is going to the object class because animal's parent is object, right? Now I could see one question that why do I need to actually say super? So Ankit, I actually don't need to do that. As I mentioned that if I comment this out or if I do not say super, right, compiler will automatically insert this line for me. So I do not need to do this explicitly. Okay. Sonu's question is, if we enter super animal, what will be the output? Sonu, that will be actually wrong. You cannot say super animal because you cannot pass an animal. What exactly is animal which you are saying I should pass here? Right? What is this? This is some kind of reference variable. What exactly is this? You cannot do that because it will depend upon what kind of constructor you have. A constructor in animal which doesn't take any arguments, then you have to say only super, you cannot say anything else, right? If however you had an animal constructor, let's say, which was taking a string as a parameter, then you would have to say super with some parameter here, right? So of course, kind of constructor you are having in animal. If you are not having any no argument constructor, then you cannot say super. This will give you compilation error, right? In this case, now you have to explicitly call this constructor by saying A, B, C, D, or whatever parameter name you want to give. Right? Is this clear? Okay, great. Now always remember that this call to super, right? This call to super which you are doing, if it is present in your constructor explicitly, it should be the first line. Right? It should be the first line. You cannot place it anywhere else in your constructor. If you try to place it anywhere else in your constructor, you will get a compilation error. It should be the first line and always the first line. Okay. However, what you can do is one thing. There is one, omit this from here, right? That is, do not make a call to the parent class constructor, right? And compiler also doesn't insert super for you. Anybody knows what I'm talking about? Again, let me repeat. So what I'm saying is there is one scenario in which you don't need to have the first line in a call to super, right? And compiler will also not do that for you. That is, compiler will check your first line and it will still not insert a call to super. Okay, so that can happen if you are trying to call a constructor of the same class. Okay, so if you're trying to call the constructor of a same class, so let me repeat. So let's say if you have a constructor here of horse class which was taking string as a parameter, right? Then what you can actually do is, instead of making a call to the parent class from this constructor directly, right, what you can do is you can delay that a little bit. You can delay that a little bit because you have two constructors here. Let's say this is initializing some variables of the horse class and this is initializing some other variable of this class. And now whenever this constructor is called, like public horse string str, what you want to do is you want to first of all call this particular constructor, right, and then make a call to parent. Right? So what you can actually do is something like this. Here you can say this, right, and then insert, sorry, you don't need any arguments here because you're calling the one constructor which is not taking any arguments, right? And then you can say here, for example, system.out.println, let's say horse with str as the parameter. Now, what do you think will be the output if I say horse h equal to new horse? Let me just pass in some parameter here, ABC. What do you think will be the output now? No, so when you are saying this, you are not actually calling the constructor of the parent class, you are just calling the constructor of the same class, right? An overloaded constructor of the same class which matches the signature that you have specified here. So for example, the signature here is no argument. So this is the constructor that you are trying to call. Alright guys, so here the first thing that you should notice is that when the compiler compiles this constructor, it will see that you are making a call to the constructor of the same class. So it will not interfere here. That is, it will not insert a call to super before this. Okay, it will not do that. But when it will come here, right, it will see that in this particular constructor, you are neither calling the constructor of the same class, nor you are calling the constructor of the animal, which is, nor you are calling any constructor of animal. Okay, so in this case, what it will do is, it will insert super. However, I think as Vishnu has mentioned, in this case you will get a compilation error because compiler will not for you, right? Compiler will not be able to do this for you because this animal constructor is taking a string, right? And compiler can only insert a call to super with no argument, right? So what you need to do is you need to remove this from here, or you need to call super explicitly with string as the parameter. Right, and now I think you can easily imagine what will be the complete output, right? So you will see animal, right? After that, horse, right? And then horse str. Okay, any questions anyone is having here? Okay, Ankit, so I will explain again. Simple rule that you need to remember is that in a constructor, the first line can only be a call either to the parent class, right, which is super, or it can be a call to the constructor of the same class. Either of these things should be there, right? If you do not do either of these things, right, if you do not do either of these things, compiler will insert a super for you. And of course, you will need to see that whether that super call will be successful or not, right? Because if animal class doesn't have no argument constructor, then that super with no argument will be, right? So that of course you need to take care of. That parent class has appropriate constructor, right? However, if you insert this or a super yourself explicitly, compiler will not touch that constructor because that is perfectly fine. Right? Having a this or super as the first line is perfectly fine, and compiler will not touch that for you. That is perfectly fine. Any questions here? Right, I can see one question from Raj. How does it work with abstract classes since they don't have constructors? Raj, abstract classes do have constructors. And in fact, every class has a constructor. Right? If you do not specify any constructor in a class, it doesn't mean that it doesn't have any constructor. It will always get a no argument constructor if you do not specify any constructor explicitly. Same is the case with abstract classes as well. Only thing with the abstract classes is that you cannot call the constructor of an abstract class with new. Right? So you cannot say new and then abstract class name followed by whatever arguments your constructor is taking. You cannot do that because abstract classes do not permit an object creation. Okay, and you can see a few more questions. Upan's question is, when there is no argument constructed, it is not necessary to insert. Yes, absolutely correct. If there is argument specified, it's not need. Okay, you do not need to insert super in that case. Sonu's question is, interface has constructor or not? Not Sonu, no interface. Interfaces do not have any constructors. Okay. Sonu's question, one more question. I think there are a few more questions. One question is from Vinod. What will it put there when you do not put this in a constructor with argument? So Vinod, compiler will always try to insert a call to super. Okay. So if you are not making a call to super or this yourself, right? So doesn't matter whether the constructor is taking any argument or not. Right, so for example, let me come here. Right, in this horse constructor which is taking string str as the parameter, if you do not insert this as the first line, compiler will still only try to insert a call to super. Right, compiler will always try to do this. Right, it will not try to insert a call to one of your parent class constructor, let's say, which is taking some parameter. It cannot do that because then there is ambiguity on what parameter value it should pass. Right, so it is programmed in such a way that it will only try to insert a call to super with no argument. Okay, you can see one question from Sonu. If I put in horse constructor something like this, super ABC, then what will happen? Sonu, right now, for example, if you say super ABC here, right, then right now it will give you compilation error because animal class doesn't have any constructor taking string as the parameter. You see that? There is no constructor in animal which is having a string parameter. So if you want this call super with string ABC to be successful, right, in that case you need to insert a constructor in animal which is taking string as the parameter. Is that clear? Guys, give me 1 minute. I think some issue has happened here. Hello? Hello? Is anyone able to hear me? Wait 1 minute. There seems to be some issue in GoToMeeting, I think. Just give me 1 minute. Let me see what is the issue. There seems to be some issue from GoToMeeting side here. Okay, we are good now, right? Is my voice clear now? All right, great. Thanks, Vishnu. Thanks for confirming. All right, so let me see where did I lose you guys, and if there are any questions in between. You can see one question from Vinod. Vinod, it's asking, will it always be super or super with str? So Vinod, if compiler is doing that for you, compiler will only try to insert super, that is without any parameter. Okay. However, when you are doing it explicitly, you can call any animal constructor that is available. All right, so guys, let me, I think, continue. If I missed any of your questions, please just type that again in the questions panel here. because I am not sure which questions exactly I didn't answer. So just type those questions again in the questions panel here, and I will for sure answer them. But let me move ahead from the constructors to the initialization blocks now. Or maybe I think we can discuss one quick question before actually doing that. So just give me one more minute. Alright, so you can see there is this class up and then there is this class down which is extending from up, right? Let me know what will be the output if this code is run. You can see public static void main defined. We are trying to create a down object, right? And then we are saying down.x. Take 2-3 minutes. Let me know what will be the answer. And just type which option do you think is correct. So Sonu, you can do that. So you're saying you want to insert super ABC in the horse constructor which is taking string as the parameter, right? You can do that, but then animal class does need to have a constructor which is taking string as the parameter, right? Otherwise it will not work. All right, so I can see a lot of answers. So let's discuss this one now. Let's see what will be the output. So when you say down b equal to new down, okay, first thing to remember is that this x will be already initialized with the value 3, okay. That would already have been then when this up class would have been loaded, right? Now when you say down b equal to new down, right, you are calling this constructor of down, right? You can see that in this constructor we haven't done any explicit super here, right? So what will happen? Compiler will insert super for you, right? Compiler will do this. So following this, we will come to this particular constructor of up. Here you will see we are calling a constructor which is taking int as the parameter, so we come here, right? Please note that in this constructor we are taking a value of the z parameter, but we are not using it anywhere, right? We are not using it anywhere, and even in this constructor, compiler will insert a call to super, right? But this call will go to the object class. Anyways, once you come from that object class constructor, you will come back here, and here you see this line x star equal to 3, which will change x to 9. X is already 3. When you say x star equal to 3, it will become 9. Then you come back here because you have already done this call, and you say x plus plus, which will change x to 10. Now you come back here, you have already done the super call, you say x plus equal to 2, which will change this to 12. Okay, so your final output, which is printed here, will be 12. Betty's question is, why does x star equal to 3 produces 9? Betty, this is because x was initially 3, you can see from this line, and then x star equal to 3 will change it to 9, right? Right, any questions anyone is having here? Alright, Deepika's question is, what is this 2? So Deepika, here when you are saying this too, right, this means you are calling the constructor of the same class, right? You are calling the constructor of the same class which is taking int as the parameter, right? So instead of calling the parent class, you are calling the constructor of the same class here, which is an overloaded constructor, you can say, right? So this call comes here. Okay, I can see one question from Betty regarding x star equal to 3. So Betty, actually this is the syntax. So when you say x star equal to 3, what this will be actually changed to is following: x equal to x star 3. Okay, so this is how this is actually being converted to. X star equal to 3 is x equal to x star 3. You can in fact do it with other operators as well. You can say x plus equal to 3 and it will become x equal to x plus 3. Right, so this is how it is actually getting transformed, right? Okay, I can see few more questions. Nikita's question is super calls object class in up means what? Okay, so Nikita, it's super call here is basically being done to the object class, right? But object class constructor is basically empty. So I just inserted it for correctness, but it is not required. Right, compiler will do this, but it is not meaningful because this call will go to the object class constructor where actually nothing will happen because object class constructor is empty. Cynthia's question is, do all the constructors in the up class call super? No. This constructor is only making a call to super. This is not. Right? This constructor of up class is not calling the super constructor because here you are calling the constructor of the same class. Right? So either you can have a call to this or you can have a call to super, but not both. Right? But any of these should be there. Okay? Questions? Alright. Then let's move on. Now what I'm going to do is I am going to discuss about something called class loading and I will give you an overview of static blocks. Then we will see a few questions, or you can say some code snippets which will test your understanding of on how the code actually flows when you have multiple static blocks and different things. Okay. So first thing, what exactly is class loading? Okay. Class loading is following. You have a .class file which you would have created by compiling your source file, right? So you have a .java file, you use the JavaC compiler to compile it, and what it gives you a .class file, right? Now whenever you want to run your class or whatever you want to do with other classes, right? What you do is you say Java and then you specify the name of the class that you want to run, right? Now first thing that JVM will need to do is JVM will need to load that particular class which you have specified here. So when you say Java and then you specify name of some class that you want to run, com.test.play, let's say, right? So it will need to load this play class from somewhere, right? Play class will be residing as play.class somewhere in your file system, right? Now how will JVM first of all find this play.class? It will find it through something called class path. You don't need to worry about it. Class path is just very simple environment variable. You can say a parameter to the Java command as well, right? So you can say Java -cp and then you can specify the folders where you think your .class file might be running, right? And JVM will take care of basically fetch your particular .class file from that location. Now, this .class file is taken from the file system and it is loaded in the JVM's memory. It's needed to do that because this .class file contains all the information regarding this play class, right? What are the different methods it is having, what are the different instructions present in those methods, and if JVM is required to call any of those methods, right, it will need to refer to those bytecode instructions of those methods, right? So it would be very costly if it didn't load the class, right? If it was doing it directly from the file system, it would be very costly. So that is why it loads these .class file into its memory, and this process is actually called class loading, right? Now whenever your class is loaded, there is something called static blocks which you can define in your class which will also run. Upanshu's question is why we write Java file name, can't we write only file name? Sorry Upanshu, I didn't get your question, so can you just elaborate it more? Okay, please elaborate it more in the questions panel here. Okay, meanwhile I will just continue. So static blocks are those pieces of code which you can define in your class and they will be executed just once, right, and only once when your class is actually getting loaded, right? Their syntax is as follows. So let's suppose you have a class called test define, right? Now what you can do is you can define certain static blocks in this class. Static blocks can be defined like this: static followed by open and close curly braces. Right? Now you can write any piece of code that you want here, but normally what we do is we initialize our static variables here. Right? Now you will say that why do you need to initialize static variables here and why not initialize them, let's say, through call to some method? The reason is static blocks cannot be called explicitly. Right? Static blocks cannot be called explicitly, so you can never invoke a static block explicitly like a method. Right? So if you want to do something which should be done just once and only once when that class is loaded, do it in the static block. Okay. Now I can see question from Upanshu, as you have written Java com.test.play, can't we write only com.test.play? No Upanshu, you cannot do that because com.test.play is not an executable file, right? Java, which is the JVM, understands the format of the play.class, right? That is why you need to say Java followed by com.test.play. You cannot directly run com.test.play because you need JVM to understand whatever is written inside it and then execute the code inside it, right? Right. So Nikita's question is, what do these static blocks do? So Nikita, these static blocks actually initialize your static variables. Right? It depends what you are actually doing inside them. Right? So right now, for example, it is doing nothing. Right? But you can have some meaningful code. For example, you can have int status. Right? Some kind of status variable that we have defined, and let's say it is a static variable. Now what you can do inside the static block is you can write some very complex code here. Right? You can say make a connection to database, right? You can have some code for that and then fetch the status value from there, right? Now you can see that you cannot do this complete stuff at this declaration itself, right? What you can do at the time of declaration is just initialize it with some hard-coded value. But if you want that value to be fetched from somewhere else, of course you will need to write some piece of code, right? And the best place to do that is static block. Betty's question is, I'm able to only see my questions. Should I be able to see others' questions? Betty, yes, you should be able to see other people's question as well. As people are asking, I think questions, I think people have options to actually posting the questions to all the public or just to me, but I can see everyone is actually posting questions as a public. So you should be able to see other people's question as well. And don't worry, in any case, I will repeat the question before answering it, okay? So anytime I'm answering anybody's question, I will first repeat the question and then answer that. Alright, Jitendra's question is, can we declare class as static? So Jitendra, you cannot declare a normal class as static, but there is something called inner classes. Okay, there are something called inner classes. There you can use the static modifier with them. But you cannot say here class type. Santosh question is, can we initialize static variables by using constructors? Santosh, you can do that, but that will not be good, right? Why will you want to initialize your static variables in the constructor? Static variables can be used without your object of class being created, right? So for example, let's say this test class is having this status variable, right? And what you did is following. You had a test constructor, right? And you said status equal to 90, Definitely you can do that. Nobody is stopping you from doing this, right? But consider what will happen if I have something like this. Let's say I have a method defined somewhere, public void m1, right? And what I'm doing here is I'm just saying system.lm dot status. I am not creating any test object. Oh, is the voice not coming clear? I can see comment from Betty that audio is not clear. Okay, let me check, guys. I think this GoToMeeting is causing some issues today. All right, guys, is it fine now? Any better? Okay, great. I see some questions, and okay, so I was discussing about this thing, right? So you can see what will be the output here when I say system.out.println.status. Will it be 0 or will it be 90? Let's say this M1 is present inside somewhere, some class, and you're calling it. So Ankit, yeah, I actually haven't defined it correctly, so this should be enclosed inside some class and called properly from some other method, right? But assuming that everything else is declared fine, right? And if this method is called, what will be the output, right? Of course, you're correct. A method cannot exist outside any class, right? But assume that this method is properly wrapped inside any other class, all the other syntax issues are fine, and then this method is being called. Right, so as you can see, that answer is going to be 0 and it is not going to be 90. So that is why it is not useful if you initialize your static variables in constructor, right? Because you could be using those static variables even before you create an object of your class, right? So never do this. Never initialize your static variables in constructors. Initialize them in your static blocks, or if you are having hard-coded values and you know what value you need to initialize with, just put it directly there with the static variable. Don't even need to use static variables in that case. Alright, now the thing about static blocks is that they are executed whenever a class is loaded, right? They are executed whenever a class is loaded, and you can define multiple static blocks in a class. You can define multiple static blocks in a class. So for example, you can say system.out.println B here. Let's say this is one static block. And then you can define another static block as well. Right? Now if there are multiple static blocks defined in a class, right? If there are multiple static blocks defined in a class, they will be executed in the order in which they are defined. Okay. Now the question comes, when exactly will a static block will be executed, or when do you think a class will be loaded, right? So there are only 3 events which can actually lead to loading of a class, right? And I will show you an example of all those 3 events. So first event which can actually lead to loading of a class is constructor being called. So if you're trying to call a constructor of a class, right? And if that class has not been loaded till then, the class will be firstly loaded, right? Which will lead to all the static blocks being executed, and then of course your constructor will be called. Second event is if you're trying to access a static variable or a static method of a class, right? And if that class has not been loaded till then, the class will be loaded first of all, right? And then of course, then only you can access the static variables or methods of that class. And the third one is child class needs to be loaded. So if you're trying to load a child class, of course it parents needs to be loaded first, right? And then only you can load the child class. So let me just quickly give you an example of this complete thing. So let's say we have this class test in which what we have done is, so guys, I will come to your questions. I can see a few questions in the questions panel here. Don't worry, I will just come to them. Let me just finish the main topic that I wanted to finish today. Yes, Eugene, you are correct. So Eugene is saying when the class is loaded programmatically, you can actually do that, and then also these static blocks will be executed yet. So you can actually do that. You can actually say that class being loaded through programmatically or explicitly. Explicitly, I would say. Okay, explicitly is the better term to be used here. And this is the test class defined. Say you have alpha defined. Okay, and in this alpha class, what you are having, let's say you are having a static variable whose value is 90, and then you are having a static block which is having just one system.out.println, which is saying let's say here we have another static block which is printing out A, and finally we have alpha constructor as well, which is, let's say, printing out C. Okay, now let me just compact this a little bit and quiz you guys on few things. So if I say alpha A equal to new alpha, okay, what will be the output here? So guys, there is this M also in the picture, right? This M will be also there somewhere in the output. Right. So guys, the output will be following. You will first of all print this M, right? And the alpha class will be loaded only at this line, right? Because you can see you are using the alpha class for the first time here. So at this point of time, alpha class will be loaded, which will first of all lead to execution of the static blocks, which is this one, followed by this one, and then of course the constructor, which you were actually calling here, right? So here you will now see the constructor getting called. Okay, let me do one small change here. Let me remove these markers from here. I could see one question. I think I don't remember who posted that, but there was one question regarding whether the static blocks will be executed if a class doesn't have a main method, right? And you are, let's say, saying Java in that particular class name. So answer is yes, static blocks will be executed, and after that JVM will notice that your class doesn't have a main method, and then it will of course throw an exception, that main method not found. But your static blocks would have been executed by then. Okay, so your static blocks will be executed even if your class is not having main method. But of course JVM will immediately crash because it needs to start from the main method, right? Okay, now here let me say one more thing. Alpha dot val equal to, let's say, 100, and then I have system dot out dot println, let's say R. Okay, any changes in the output now? Please be very careful about when the alpha class will be loaded, at which line alpha class will be loaded now. So guys, please note the events that I listed which can lead to loading of a class, right? Constructor being called, static variables or methods being accessed, child class need to be loaded, or class being loaded explicitly. So I think in this we will hit this particular second event. Right, so you can see this second line here, alpha dot val equal to 100. Right, think about it. Can you access the val variable actually without loading the class? You can't do that, right? How will you know what type of variable val is and what value can be assigned to it, right? You cannot actually do that unless you have loaded the alpha class, right? So alpha class will be actually loaded here. So first of all, of course, you will print m. After that, when you say alpha dot val equal to 100, you will first of all print the static block, followed by this particular static block, right? After that, the class has been loaded, you will assign val to 100, right? And then you will say system dot out dot println r, which will print r, of course, right? And finally, you will call the constructor here, right? Please note that the alpha class static blocks will not be loaded again, right? Alpha class static block will not be loaded again or will not be executed again when you call this alpha constructor, because alpha class has been already loaded. Alright, so I can see one question from Ankit. Ankit's question is, how does the test class know that alpha exists, because alpha is below the code for test and there is no forward reference like in C++. So Ankit, I'm not sure what exactly your question is regarding how does the test class know whether alpha exists or not, right? Are you asking whether the JVM knows whether the alpha class exists or not? Because whenever someone wrote this call in this, whenever someone created this main method, right? When the compiler compiled this code of this class test having this main method, it would have compiled it only on seeing the alpha class, right? Through that class path which I told you. That class path is the environment variable where the compiler or the JVM will search for your dependencies. So for example, this test is dependent on this alpha class, right? You can say that this test is dependent on the alpha class. So at runtime, JVM will look in the class path, and at compile time, compiler will also look in the class path for the presence of alpha. Okay. Raja, yes, you can. We will share the recorded video of the session. Don't worry about that. Nikita's question is, can we access alpha.val without creating alpha object? So yes, Nikita, we are doing that. You can see we are saying alpha.val equal to 100, right? And we are not creating alpha's object anywhere, right? We are of course doing that at this fourth line, right? But for doing this, we don't need to create an alpha object because val is a static variable.